The massive transport ship roared through the dark void of space, heading toward its destination, Sirius Prime, home to the infamous Voidfang Academy. This was no ordinary school. It was a place where the strongest warriors in the galaxy were forged, a brutal training ground where only the toughest survived. The academy had a grim reputation. Half of the cadets never made it past their first year. Standing among the new arrivals was Ethan Carter, the first human ever accepted into the academy. He was only 18, but he had trained his entire life for this moment. His short brown hair was damp with sweat, his uniform stiff and new. Around him, towering alien cadets whispered among themselves, their voices a mix of deep growls, hisses, and kicks. A human. He won't last a day. Ethan ignored the stares. He had expected this. Every species here had evolved for war. Massive reptilian Drakari, armored insect-like Kryn, and the shadowy, multi-limbed Nixari. Compared to them, he looked small, weak. But he wasn't afraid. He had something they didn't: determination. A deep voice echoed through the massive steel hall. Commander Xalvok, a towering Drakari with obsidian scales, stepped forward. His yellow eyes scanned the recruits. "Welcome to Voidfang Academy. You are not warriors. Not yet. You are weak, pathetic, untested. Most of you will fail. Some of you will die." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Your first test begins now." A loud siren blared. The ground beneath them rumbled. The floor split open, and the cadets dropped into darkness. Underscore 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 underscore. Ethan hit the ground hard, rolling as he landed. Around him, other cadets groaned, getting to their feet. They had fallen into a massive underground chamber lit by eerie red lights. The walls were covered in strange metallic vines, pulsing as if alive. A voice crackled over the speakers above. "Your mission is simple. Survive." A heavy door at the far end slammed open. Out of the shadows came the creatures. They were fast, too fast. Tall, insect-like beasts with razor-sharp limbs screeched as they lunged forward. Their black, glassy eyes reflected the cadets' fear. Ethan barely dodged a strike, rolling to the side as claws slashed the air where he had stood a moment before. Panic spread. Some cadets screamed. Some ran. Others froze, their fate sealed in seconds. Blood splattered against the walls as the weakest were cut down. Ethan forced himself to move. Think, adapt, fight. He had trained for combat, but this was different. This was real. He grabbed a fallen cadet's weapon, an electrified baton. Not much, but better than nothing. A beast lunged at him. He ducked, then slammed the baton into its side. The creature screeched as electricity surged through its body, its limbs twitching. It wasn't dead, but it was hurt. The academy wasn't testing their strength. It was testing their will to live. Around him, the real warriors were emerging. A Drakari cadet crushed a beast's head with his bare hands. A Kryn slashed through two at once with her serrated limbs. Ethan couldn't match their raw power, but he was faster, smarter. He dodged, struck, and moved again, using his agility to his advantage. More beasts poured in. The fight wasn't ending. It was getting worse. Then Ethan saw it. A control panel on the far wall. A way out. But it was on the other side of the battlefield. There was no time to think. He sprinted, dodging attacks, leaping over fallen bodies. A claw slashed his shoulder. Pain burned through him, but he kept running. If he stopped, he was dead. He reached the panel, slammed his hand against it. The door behind him hissed open. A path to safety. The other cadets saw it too. They ran. Some made it. Some didn't. As Ethan crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind him. Silence fell. His heart pounded in his chest. He had survived. Barely. The academy's first test was over. But this was just the beginning. Ethan leaned against the cold metal wall, trying to catch his breath. His shoulder throbbed from the claw wound, but he ignored the pain. Around him, the surviving cadets were gasping, bleeding, or staring in shock at the sealed door behind them. The academy had made one thing clear: hesitation meant death. Commander Xalvok's voice boomed through hidden speakers. "Congratulations, you survived the first trial. But do not fool yourselves, this was nothing." A hidden door slid open, revealing a dimly lit corridor lined with med stations. The cadets hesitated. Was this another test? Ethan was the first to move. He stepped inside cautiously. No traps, just automated medical units scanning the wounded. He allowed one of the machines to tend to his shoulder, its metallic arms stitching and sealing the wound in seconds. The other cadets followed, some limping, others looking at him as if seeing him in a new light. He was the only human here, but he had survived the same nightmare they had. A tall, blue-skinned alien with 3 eyes approached him. "You fight well, for a human." Her voice was sharp, but not unkind. Ethan met her gaze. "You too." Before she could respond, alarms blared again. The walls shifted, revealing new doors leading into separate chambers. The cadets were being divided. Ethan's stomach twisted. This wasn't over. Each chamber had different environments: gravity training, endurance trials, tactical combat scenarios. This was designed to push them beyond their limits. Ethan stepped through his assigned door and found himself in a room with no gravity. The walls were lined with floating obstacles, each with glowing pressure plates. A mechanical voice spoke: "Adapt or be eliminated." Suddenly, high-speed drones zipped into the room, firing stun blasts. Ethan barely twisted in time to avoid getting hit. He pushed off a floating panel, using the zero gravity to propel himself. He wasn't just fighting enemies now, he was fighting physics itself. He reached out, pressing one of the glowing plates. A shockwave pulsed through the room, momentarily disabling the drones. That was the trick. The plates reset the field. Ethan gritted his teeth. This wasn't just a test of skill, it was a test of intelligence. If he wanted to survive, he needed to think faster than ever before. The zero-gravity training chamber had pushed Ethan to his limit, but he had passed. Now he stood in another dimly lit hall, facing the next stage of the Academy's brutal trials. The surviving cadets gathered in silence, their bodies tense. The air was thick with unspoken fear. Commander Salavuk loomed before them, his reptilian features sharp under the cold, artificial lights. "You have proven you can survive chaos, but strength is not enough. Here you will learn discipline, or you will break." The metal floor beneath them rumbled. Massive steel doors groaned open, revealing a dark chamber beyond. One by one, the cadets stepped inside. Ethan hesitated for only a second before following. Inside, the walls were lined with rows of tall, armored figures, training drones. Humanoid, but eerily still, their faceless helmets gleamed under the dim red glow of the overhead lights. Then the doors sealed shut behind them. A deep mechanical voice boomed from above. "Combat Trial 2, Team Obedience." A countdown flashed on the screens. 30 seconds. Ethan turned to the others, his pulse quickening. "We have to work together on this one." A nearby Drakari cadet snorted, his massive frame tense. "I work with my own, not weaklings." Before Ethan could argue, the countdown hit 0. The training drones came to life. With a mechanical roar, they surged forward in perfect synchronization. Their armored fists struck with bone-breaking force, sending an unprepared cadet crashing into the wall. The impact left a dent in the metal. The others reacted too late. A Kryn warrior tried to charge, only to be knocked to the ground by a coordinated strike from 2 drones. Ethan barely dodged a fist aimed at his ribs. They're not fighting like individuals. Their attacks were precise, mechanical. They didn't move alone. They moved as one. That was the test. The Academy wasn't looking for the strongest warrior. It was looking for unity. A cry of pain snapped him back. The Drakari who had refused to work with others was on his knees, gasping for breath. A drone's heavy foot was pressing on his chest, slowly crushing the life out of him. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to move. He grabbed a fallen button and lunged at the drone, striking its exposed side. Sparks flew as the force of the hit made it stumble, loosening its grip. The Drakari rolled free, coughing. Ethan pulled him up. "Are you done fighting alone?" The Drakari's yellow eyes flashed with something unreadable. Then he nodded. "Fine. What's your plan, human?" Ethan's mind raced. The drones weren't adapting to individuals, they were reacting to patterns. If they changed the way they fought, they could break the system. "Switch opponents every 5 seconds, Ethan said quickly. "Don't engage the same drone twice. If we stay unpredictable, they can't sync their attacks." The others hesitated, but when the drones advanced again, they followed his lead. Ethan ducked under a strike and switched targets. The Drakari slammed into another drone before it could react. The Kryn spun away from her attacker, confusing it just long enough for another cadet to strike. The drones faltered. Their once perfect coordination began to break. Ethan felt something shift. For the first time, they weren't just surviving, they were winning. The battle was still brutal. One cadet was knocked unconscious. Another barely avoided having their arm crushed. But the moment Ethan spotted the control panel in the far corner, he knew they had a chance. "Cover me," he yelled. The Drakari and Kryn warriors surged forward, drawing the drone's attention. Ethan sprinted, dodging an outstretched metal hand. He slammed his fist against the console, praying he was fast enough. A high-pitched whine filled the air. Then, the drones froze. Silence. Then a deep laugh echoed through the chamber. Commander Xolvok's voice rang from the speakers. "Well done," he rumbled. "Most recruits fail this test. They think strength alone wins battles. You have proven otherwise." The doors slid open. The cadets, battered and exhausted, stepped through. Ethan exhaled, his muscles aching. He had survived another trial, but he knew the academy wasn't done with him yet. Not even close. The survivors barely had time to catch their breath before the academy's relentless tests continued. The metal doors slid shut behind them with a final hiss, sealing them inside yet another chamber. This time, there were no drones, no immediate threats. Instead, the room was cold, eerily silent, and lined with tall, glass observation panels. The air smelled sterile, like disinfectant and steel. Ethan's instincts screamed that something was wrong. Commander Xolvok's voice echoed through hidden speakers. "Strength and discipline mean nothing without endurance. A warrior does not break under pressure. They do not yield. They do not beg. Today, we separate those worthy of becoming soldiers from those who are merely survivors." A low hum filled the room. Then, without warning, the gravity shifted. It wasn't a normal shift. 1 second, Ethan felt weightless, floating just above the floor. The next, his entire body slammed down with crushing force, his knees nearly buckling. Around him, the other cadets groaned in pain, struggling to stay upright. A timer appeared on the walls. 20:00, 2 hours. Ethan gritted his teeth. They had to withstand this for 2 full hours. The gravity pulsed again, doubling its force. He heard a sharp cry. A cadet collapsed, their body unable to take the pressure. Immediately, a panel in the floor opened beneath them, and they were gone. Ethan's stomach twisted. There were no second chances here. If you collapsed, you were out. The minutes crawled by. His limbs screamed. His vision blurred. Sweat tricked from his face, but he forced himself to stay standing. Around him, more cadets dropped, disappearing through the floor. His legs trembled. His mind screamed at him to fall. But he refused. He wasn't just fighting gravity. He was fighting himself. The pain, the exhaustion, the overwhelming urge to surrender. Then the gravity spiked again. Ethan's knees buckled. He fell to one knee, gasping. From across the room, the Drakari cadet who had once mocked him, now one of the few still standing, growled through clenched teeth. "On your feet, human." Ethan forced his arms to move, pushing against the crushing weight. His body refused. His muscles burned. Then he heard Xolvok's voice again. "Weaklings break. Warriors endure." With a final roar, Ethan pushed up, fighting through the agony, and stood. The timer hit 0:00. The gravity cut out instantly. Ethan and the other remaining cadets collapsed, panting. Out of the original group, only a handful remained. The doors opened. Xolvok stood there, watching them with cold, unreadable eyes. Then, for the first time, he gave a small nod. "You are still here. Good." Ethan barely had the strength to stand, but he knew one thing. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was enduring. Ethan barely had time to recover before the next trial began. His body still ached from the gravity endurance test, but he pushed the pain aside. He wasn't alone. Every cadet who had survived looked just as exhausted. Yet the academy had no intention of letting them rest. Commander Xolvok led them into a massive, darkened chamber. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, shrouded in thick shadows. Strange, twisted trees with metallic bark loomed overhead, their leaves glowing faintly in the darkness. The air was thick, humid, carrying an eerie silence. Xolvok's voice boomed through the darkness. "This is the hunting grounds. In battle, the weak are prey and the strong are predators. You will prove which one you are." A sharp mechanical click sounded from the walls. Dozens of small lights flickered to life within the trees. Eyes, watching, waiting. Xolvok continued. "Your task is simple. survive until dawn, or be hunted. The moment he finished speaking, the floor beneath them trembled. Then, the predators were unleashed. The shadows moved. Ethan barely had time to react before a creature lunged at him from the darkness. It was fast, almost invisible in the dim light, but he saw the faint glint of metal just before it struck. He threw himself to the side, narrowly avoiding the swipe of razor-sharp claws. The creature let out a guttural hiss and vanished back into the trees. The cadets scattered. Some tried to fight. Their screams were short-lived. Ethan's heart pounded as he ducked behind the thick roots of a tree. He had no weapon, no armor, just his instincts. Think, adapt, survive. He closed his eyes and listened. The creatures weren't attacking randomly. They were stalking, waiting for weakness, testing their prey. A distant snarl, a scream cut short. Ethan tightened his fists. He wouldn't be prey. He had to become the hunter. Moving silently, he pressed himself against the tree, scanning for movement. A faint shimmer in the air. One of the creatures was approaching another cadet, completely unseen. Ethan picked up a small metal shard from the ground and threw it toward the opposite side of the clearing. The distraction worked. The creature turned, reacting to the sound. The cadet noticed just in time and ran. Ethan exhaled. He couldn't win this alone. If they wanted to survive, they needed to turn the hunt against the hunters. From the shadows, glowing eyes stared back at him. The night was far from over. The night stretched on, each minute feeling like an eternity. The unseen predators moved through the shadows, striking with terrifying precision. The surviving cadets were scattered, some trying to fight, most just trying to survive. Ethan crouched behind a thick tree root, his breath steady but controlled. He had counted at least 4 of the creatures, fast, silent, and nearly invisible in the darkness. The Academy wasn't just testing their endurance anymore. This was about strategy. The rules were clear: survive until dawn. But Ethan knew that staying on the defensive was a death sentence. He needed to change the game. A sharp scream rang out from somewhere to his left, then silence. Another cadet gone. Ethan clenched his fists. Enough. He needed help. Crawling low, he moved through the undergrowth, scanning for any remaining cadets. He spotted 2, Ruthless, the massive Drakari warrior, and Tali, the blue-skinned Kren with sharp, serrated limbs. They were hiding, exhausted, their eyes darting around, searching for the next attack. Ethan took a risk and whispered, "We need to stop running." Both turned sharply toward him, their bodies tense to attack. "Are you insane, human?" Ruthless growled. "We are being hunted." "Exactly," Ethan said. "And right now, we're playing by their rules. We need to flip the hunt, turn their tactics against them." Tali's glowing yellow eyes narrowed. "How?" Ethan pointed to the trees. "They're fast, but they rely on stealth. If we limit their movement, we can force them into a fight on our terms." Ruthless let out a low rumble. "A trap." Ethan nodded. "A kill zone. We need to draw them in." Tali's mandibles clicked in thought. "Bait." Ethan exhaled. "I'll do it." The other 2 hesitated. Even Ruthless, despite his warrior's pride, looked uncertain. "Humans are reckless," he muttered. "Fine, but if you die, I will laugh." Ethan smirked. "Just be ready." Underscore 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 underscore. Ethan sprinted through the trees, making as much noise as possible. The glowing eyes in the darkness snapped toward him. The creatures moved, fast. Ethan pushed himself harder, leading them exactly where he wanted, toward a narrow clearing between 2 massive roots. He dived forward, rolling at the last second. The creatures followed. That was their mistake. The moment they entered the clearing, Ruthless and Tali struck. Ruthless swung a massive tree branch like a club, slamming one of the predators into the ground. Tali moved like a blur, her razor-sharp limbs slicing through another before it could react. For the first time, the hunters were caught off guard. Ethan grabbed a fallen cadet's electrified baton and drove it into the nearest creature's neck. Sparks flew. The beast shrieked and collapsed. The remaining creatures hesitated. They weren't used to resistance. Then, just as suddenly as they had appeared, the predators vanished back into the trees. The 3 cadets stood panting in the darkness. They had survived. For now. The first hints of dawn began to rise over the alien horizon. The test was almost over, but Ethan knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about surviving the night. This was about proving that humans weren't prey. They were hunters. The first rays of dawn crept over the alien horizon, painting the twisted metallic trees in hues of red and gold. The hunting grounds, once filled with movement and death, had fallen silent. The remaining cadets, those who had survived, stood bruised, bleeding, but alive. Ethan, Rylos, and Tali stood together, their breathing heavy. The creatures had retreated, their ambush shattered. But Ethan knew the test wasn't over. Nothing at Voidfang Academy was ever that simple. A deep, rumbling voice echoed through the air. Impressive. Commander Solvok's massive form emerged from the tree line. His obsidian scales gleamed under the morning light, his golden eyes scanning the exhausted cadets. Behind him, a group of Academy instructors stood watching, their expressions unreadable. "You have done what many before you could not," Solvok said. "You survived the hunt." A pause, then his gaze locked onto Ethan. "But some of you did more than that." Ethan tensed but held his ground. Solvok stepped forward, towering over him. "You did not just endure the test. You changed it. You hunted the hunters." Murmurs spread among the instructors. Even some of the surviving cadets looked at Ethan with new eyes. The unspoken truth settled over them. This wasn't supposed to happen. The Academy had spent centuries shaping warriors through pain and fear. The weak were meant to be culled, the strong to rise, but Ethan had broken the pattern. And the Academy had noticed. Solvok studied him for a long moment, then turned to address all the cadets. "This was the final trial of your initiation." His voice was like thunder. "You have proven that you deserve to be here." A wave of relief washed over the survivors. They had made it. But Ethan wasn't satisfied. He took a step forward. "Then tell me something, Commander." Solvok's gaze snapped back to him. A few cadets sucked in their breath. Challenging a high-ranking instructor was suicide. Ethan didn't flinch. "This academy was built to create the strongest warriors in the galaxy," he said. "But strength isn't just about survival. It's about adaptation, strategy, leadership." Solvok's expression was unreadable. "Your tests are designed to break us, but I prove there's another way." Ethan's voice was steady, firm. "So tell me, are you training killers or are you training leaders?" A long silence stretched between them. Then, to everyone's shock, Solvok smiled. A rare, sharp-toothed grin. "You are bold, human," he said, "and perhaps you are right." He turned away, his voice booming once more. "Initiation is over. You are now full cadets of Voidfang Academy." Then, with a final glance at Ethan, he added, "Let us see how far you can push tradition." Underscore 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 underscore. Ethan exhaled, feeling the weight of what had just happened. He had survived. But more than that, he had changed something. For the first time in its long and brutal history, the Academy had seen a new way forward, and humanity had made its mark. But deep down, Ethan knew, this was only the beginning.